All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining on a beautiful Saturday morning. I've been outside. It's a little chilly, but I think it's supposed to warm up. Our guest today is Bill Herbert, who has been quite a bit in the news, or at least behind the news in the last couple of weeks in terms of trying to deal with a lot of stuff going on downtown on 2nd Avenue. But Bill, as I explained, first couple of minutes as we're letting people in, we just kind of gradually talk. How are you doing this morning? Everything good?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, a little head cold, but I don't have COVID. I tested just to be on the safe side. Don't have it. Been staying safe and been keeping busy. Everything seems to be good. I like your backdrop. You got the American flag, the Tennessee flag, but no pictures on the wall. So what happened?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, and then
But wait a minute. Here is the Metro flag too.
All right, so Bill, here's the $10,000 question. Do you know how we got that emblem for the Metropolitan flag? Do you know anything about the history of it?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, neither does anybody else. So we've had Carol Busey on, who's the Davidson County historian, and she explained kind of at least what she understood what it was. But she's not sure. I've asked Jim Hubler, Jim Hubler, who worked for years at Library and Archives for the state and the State Museum, I think. And I don't think he's exactly sure. Everything. So nobody's quite sure exactly what, I guess what the true answer is, but one of these days we'll get it. So before we start,
I was hoping you were going to tell me.
Well, I will eventually when I figure it out myself.
You piqued my interest and just left me hanging, Jim.
All right, I'm sorry. Well, so we got a couple council members on. That's what I was just checking. Councilmember Rutherford is on. Councilmember Cash is on. Brenda Wynn is on. She is our county clerk. And we'll recognize anybody else who gets on. I'm glad everybody's on this morning. And so it's 10:03. This is when we really get started. Let me tell you the new case numbers for COVID. 496 new cases from yesterday. That brings us to a total of 82,057. We had one death from yesterday. That leads us to about 522 deaths. We're still working on this. I know, just keeping an eye on what the mayor said this week, we are still looking for more and more vaccinations and more vaccine coming in. I know the Department of Health is working really, really hard to get this stuff done. So we'll keep you informed on this as much as we know. Keep an eye on the news. Again, I think we're set to vaccinate. We just need the vaccines coming in. Anyway, okay, so today our guest is Bill Herbert, who is the director of the Department of Codes and Building Safety. That's the official title. Many of you know Bill just from being around for years with Metro. Great guy. We're glad that you are where you are. And we're going to get into a lot of this discussions. I know a lot of people have questions about kind of what's going on with 2nd Avenue. So, Bill, as we get started, the first question to my guest are, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how did you get to be the director of codes?
So, Nashville, born and raised, here all my life. School here. I went to law school, and after law school, I went into the private practice of law here in Nashville. Developed an expertise kind of in land use and planning law, municipal law. I was asked to join the Metro Legal Department, which I did for 5 or 6 years, something like that, when former Mayor Dean was the director of law. From there, after he left as the director, I left as well and went back into private practice, specializing in zoning and land use. When Mayor Dean was elected mayor, he asked me to come back and serve as the zoning administrator after the late Sonny West had passed. So I accepted that position, came back, and that was in 2012. And from that time, I've really been here in the codes department. When Mayor Briley was elected, he asked me to take the director's position for the codes department, which I accepted. And here I am today. So there's Bill in a nutshell.
Well, and we're very glad that you moved in that direction, that you're now the director. So tell me, I guess for people who don't fully understand what codes does and building safety, what exactly does the department do? What are you responsible for?
A lot of stuff is the short answer. So we do private property as opposed to alleys and streets, which are public works. What we do is really twofold. We do the building and construction side of Nashville, and I'll go into that in more detail. We also do the property standards side of Nashville, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. So on the building side, what we do is we create all the building permit applications. With that, we do the zoning review. So what we're doing then is administering the zoning code that the Metro Council provides to us. We review the zoning code against every building permit application. We're checking for height, setbacks, things like that, parking counts, etc. For each building permit application. We create that application. We then delegate it to the other departments that would have an interest in it, like Public Works and maybe Stormwater and the Fire Marshal. We are kind of the keeper of all of the permit applications. We also review building plans if that's required for whatever's being built in-house here. Once all those sign-offs are done and all the various departments that have a stake in the proposed development, once they've approved it, that may also be the planning department. Once they've approved it, we issue the permit. Then that's the building permit, and construction begins. During the construction process, my inspectors, we inspect for the building code compliance. So those are my building inspectors. We do the electrical inspections, the plumbing inspections, and the gas mechanical inspections, all through while the building is being constructed. Once constructed and approved, again, by all the various departments that may have a stake in the construction, like the fire marshal's office, it's always a big one. Once everybody's approved, at the end of the day, we'll do final building inspections and issue a final use and occupancy letter. That just turns the building over to the building owner to be used and occupied as it was constructed and zoned to be. So that's what we do on the building side of it. On the property standards side, we administer the property standards code. And so we have a property standards division. We have about 23, I think, property standards inspectors who are assigned to areas throughout the county. And their job is to really go and look for things like junk, trash, and debris, and abandoned vehicles, and high grass and weeds, and property that's in disrepair, things like that. The fact of the matter is the property standards inspectors really, they respond to complaints. That's what they do. We don't have enough staff to be that proactive. We try to be, but the number of complaints that we get in through the hub keep the inspectors busy every single day. In other words, they leave in the morning in their vehicle with an assigned list of properties that they are to go to and inspect. And so if they find a violation, we're required by law to notify the owner of the violation. By law, we have to give them a reasonable time to fix the violation or cure. After that reasonable time, whatever it may be, generally it's 30 days. Sometimes under extreme circumstances, it might be as little as 10 days. We'll go back, re-inspect. If the violation hasn't been cured, then we will write a warrant to environmental court. We will then, when it's called on the court's docket, we will appear, we'll testify, Metro Legal will prosecute the cases. And generally we're seeking what's called a mandatory injunction, and that's in order to compel the property owner to do whatever it is we're asking them to do, like clean up their yard or cut their grass. We don't have the ability to do that. We don't have the personnel or the staff or whatever to mow people's yard and then put a lien on it. But so we have to, our enforcement is all buying through the courts. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. So we've got the construction side of things and then the property maintenance side of things, and everything that comes in between there is done by the codes department, with the exception, and like I said, we delegate out to the other departments that have stakes in any individual permit. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, so most people are usually familiar with codes complaints. People complaining about their neighbor or somebody down the street, the grass hasn't been cut, there's stuff in their front yard, whatever. So, so for people who are upset, and we were looking at, we had questions that came in through the week. There were examples of people who were sending in messages and going like, this is happening. How do you, what's the best way for people to, first of all, report a problem? And if it's through the hub, that's fine. What's the best way for them to do it? And how do they, I know some people always feel like they're never going to get a resolution on it. How do they kind of stay with it all the way from the beginning of the concern to figuring out if we can actually do something about the complaint?
Yeah. So the best way to report it is through the hub, because when you enter a complaint through the hub, it then goes through the mayor's office, and the mayor's office then delegates it to the appropriate department. And if it is codes, and it comes into us, and then we then delegate it. If it's property standards like high grass and weeds, we'll delegate it to the right person. So if it comes in through the hub, we know it's going to get to the right person who's responsible for dealing with whatever the issue may be. So in the case of property standards and just high grass and weeds, and how do we monitor it? Jim, what I'll just say is this: our inspectors are really, really busy. We could do a better job, honestly. I wish I had more people so that they could be more focused on what they do. I saw that we had a question that had come in, and it's like, well, your inspectors don't put enough information once they go and do an inspection. They don't put enough information back into the system so that we can really tell what's going on. And you know what? They're right about that. That is true enough, and we need to do a better job on that. And it's kind of, for me, it's kind of one of those obvious things that I see every single day, but until somebody really points it out to me that we need to do a better job on that, then it's one of those things that sadly maybe just gets overlooked a little bit. We've only got so many inspectors, at least on the property standards, and they're really way overworked. Time is kind of the essence to them. If they've got to go visit 20 properties during the day, once they do that, make their inspections, come back to the office and start putting in the results of the inspections, a whole lot of detail takes a whole lot more time. It's difficult, I know, but we could do a better job there. So whoever sent that question in saying we need to do a better job, it kind of clicked with me, because there's been so many times where I've gone in where somebody has emailed me about a property, and I look at it and I look and see that property standards has been out there, and then I look, you can get into e-permits and I can see the results of the inspections, and we get abbreviations, and it's like, what does that mean? I mean, I'm the director, I don't know what it means. So we can do a better job there, and we're always trying to find ways to do things better. This department is not exactly overstaffed. We're operating at the same staffing levels that the department was in 2011. Nashville has grown substantially since that time. This last year was the biggest year ever in terms of construction value. We hit $4.659 billion in construction value. And that's even with COVID. That's the highest ever in the history of the metropolitan government. So all that being said is my folks are really overworked, but you know what? Setting that aside, we need to do better with respect to how we address the complaints that the inspectors are out. We need to do a better job so that people, the public, can go into e-permits or go back into the hub, whatever, and they can have a better feel for what our inspector found.
Well, and I know we can we can always try to do better. Give me an example of, you talk about all your codes folks going out to look at potential codes violations. Do you have any idea how many reported violations you get in a given month, given week, something like that, maybe in a given year?
I'm trying to recall the number for last year, but it was, I'm thinking that it was, I think it was well over 100,000.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. I mean, just from being on the council and being around, it seems like the majority of constituent complaints we get are somebody saying that's just not being enforced properly. And, we have to send it in through the hub or wherever we send it in. And it's like, there's always something and always something more to it.
There is. And, what we see a lot of is we get a complaint on a property. The inspector goes out there. We find that the complaint's verified. We issue them a notice of violation. And let's just say it's to cut the grass. And they then cut the grass. And when we go back out on the reinspection date, the grass is cut. We close the case out. Lo and behold, next month, the grass is up above 12 inches again, and it's a repetitive kind of thing. So we see this a lot, and maybe it's junk, trash, or debris or whatever, but people, when they get the notice, many times they'll address the situation. And as soon as we close the case out, they're right back at it again.
Yeah. So a never ending process. Switch over for a minute and talk about building safety. What does that mean? Because then we're eventually going to talk about Second Avenue. So what is your department responsible for in terms of building safety?
So we are doing the inspections to make sure that buildings that are under construction are being constructed in compliance with the 2018 International Building Codes. Now, there's a bunch of codes there, and I'm just going to group them all into codes because there's a residential code, the electrical code, plumbing code, gas mechanical code, the energy code, you get it. But so under the 2018, which the council has just adopted within the last couple of months, so my inspectors are out there checking for while it's under construction, building code compliance. And so there's certain stages throughout construction that we are required to be there. And so the contractors will call us when they're ready for the inspection. So it may be a foundation inspection, and then we're checking for building code compliance. It may be a framing inspection. You get the picture there. They'll call for their electrical inspections, plumbing inspections at the appropriate time. And my inspectors are out there. And, we have about, on the average, maybe, 6 or so building inspectors. We've got about 6 plumbing inspectors, about 5 or 6 electrical inspectors, and about the same for gas mechanical inspectors. And so it's not like we have these unlimited resources. We have about, if you're calling for your electrical inspection, then, there's one of about 5 guys is going to show up out there, hopefully the next day, to do the inspections. We do everything possible to keep these inspections going. We do everything possible. Our goal is next day service. We're pretty much there right now with all of our inspections, save electrical, which may be 2 days, but we've utilized technology to the greatest extent possible to speed up our inspection processes and honestly to speed up everything that we do within the department, because it's not like we have a whole lot of money and a whole lot of people. So for us to keep up with Nashville at the same staffing levels that we had in 2011, we have to be more efficient. So I'm going to say hats off to the IT department and Keith Durbin, because without those folks, I don't know what we would do. We've become more efficient. We've adapted is what we've done to stay viable.
Yeah. Tell me, what do you say to people who, with all the development, all the buildings going on, who worry that that some of the construction is going way too fast, or that people go, it's just not very good. Your folks are out there obviously being called to approve certain parts of it and make sure that it's in compliance with the codes. What do you say to people who worry about that everything's going too fast?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've perhaps got a couple of different answers, but probably the most direct answer is this, and I'm just going to be very blunt about this, is that the international building codes that we enforce are minimum standards for construction. There are always those builders out there that want to exceed the minimum standards and build a better product. And we hope that most folks do want to do that. But there are those that sometimes don't. But for our purposes, just because the construction itself, maybe the workmanship is what I just should say. If the workmanship may not be top notch, but we can only enforce what the International Building Code requires as minimum standards. So that's what we have to look for. We can't make people do a better job if it's provided that they're meeting the minimums that are established by the International Building Codes.
Okay, got it. Okay, so tell me, let's get into particularly over the last several weeks, the bombing on 2nd Avenue, Christmas Day. So, I know people have been able to get access to 2nd Avenue now. I walk down Park Ways. There's certain parts that you can't get access to, but obviously lots of devastation to the buildings. Tell me from your standpoint, and for everybody else's who may not have been down there, what have you seen? What are your folks seeing? And what is basically the role of the codes department and building safety in regards to 2nd Avenue?
Yeah, great question. So I was down there 2 days after Christmas, I think, was the first time I was able to get down there. Now, then it was under FBI jurisdiction. Since that time, I've been down there about every other day. So I've seen it kind of from the beginning all the way through where we are today. When I first went down, my first visit down there, I was really struck by the devastation. I mean, why would somebody want to do this? My family's got a long history with Nashville. We were in the brick business going back to the very late 1700s here in Nashville, and most of those buildings really were built with brick from my family. So it's personal. It struck me very emotionally, quite frankly. So from that point, for me, it was about, okay, how are we going to move forward? How are we going to preserve these buildings? And when I first saw them, I thought, there's no way. These are too far gone. So Public Works had hired an engineer who looked at it, and the report came back that most of them were in imminent danger of collapse. My building inspectors were not so sure. The codes department, retained our own engineer, and I have been inside each of those buildings myself, along with our engineer, on a articulated lift. So I've been up inside, seen all the floors, seen the roof, along with our engineer, and it's our firm opinion that every one of these buildings can be rehabilitated. It is remarkable how well constructed these buildings were back in the late 1800s. And so while a couple of buildings, the front facade is gone, it's our firm opinion that they can be reconstructed. The sides of these buildings are remarkably stable, and the rears, save one, are in remarkably good shape. So we are working with the individual property owners and we've asked the property owners to provide us with engineering reports and assessments regarding their own individual buildings. The overwhelming majority of the property owners of the affected buildings have responded to us, so we thank them very much for doing that. So we have now, so we put a deadline for the property owners to provide us with their reports of this last Monday, the 18th. Since that time, we've had our engineer reviewing their reports. Historic Nashville Inc. has also retained their own engineer, and they retain easements over the facade of some of these buildings and the ones that were most significantly damaged. So all that being said, it's we feel like there is a really good opportunity here to rehabilitate and reconstruct these buildings in accordance with what the Historic Commission and the Planning Department and the Mayor's Office, and I think the majority of Nashvillians would like to see. So we're very, very optimistic there. For us right now, for the Codes Department, it's all about stabilizing these structures so that we do not get any further collapse. And that's for two purposes. One, first and foremost, we need to keep people down there we need to keep them safe. Secondly, if a building were to collapse, it likely would do collateral damage to other buildings that are able to be completely saved at this point. So right now for us, it's all about trying to get crews in, and these are the property owners that are bringing their own crews into their own building to stabilize these structures. We are expediting permits for stabilization and shoring up. And once these permits are issued, we're allowing the construction crews to get in, make these buildings safe. Once they're safe, then we can slow down a little bit and let the Planning Department and Historic Commission work with these individual owners to reconstruct these buildings in a historically significant way.
Okay, that's very, very important information. I wasn't sure if all the buildings could be safe. When you said that you've been up on the lifts and looking, have you looked at every one of the buildings?
Or looked at the ones that were...
Okay, has your focus been on the ones that are, I knew that there were 7 in particular concerns. Where have you spent most of your time?
The buildings between 170 and 178 2nd Avenue North. Those are the ones that were most significantly damaged. All the other buildings along 2nd Avenue, even the ones within the blast zone between Commerce and Church, we really have no concerns about. They are structurally fine, and we're 100% confident that they can be completely repaired. All the other structures along 2nd Avenue outside of that perimeter between Commerce and Church are all structurally fine. Now, there may be some little things, and what we're doing there is, in order to get people back into their buildings as quickly as possible and get their offices open and their businesses open, we've got an expedited inspection process. So if you're one of those buildings that are outside of that blast zone block, what you can do is call for the fire marshal to come in and do a life safety inspection. Our building inspector will be along with the fire marshal. We have that process set up now where if you were to call right now, well, not now because it's Saturday, but during the week, an inspector would be there within the hour, a fire marshal, life safety inspector, and a building inspector. We would go through it. If we saw no safety concerns, we'll release the building for full use and occupancy. So we're doing everything possible to get these buildings back open. We've opened 2nd Avenue back up for pedestrian traffic only up to Commerce. And we're going to stay very flexible as this site changes from a blast zone to a construction site. We're going to do everything possible to open the streets back up as quickly as we can. And, you know, this is, Jim, I mean, this is evolving literally daily. So it's been a challenge for us, no doubt. Ever since Christmas morning, it has consumed my every waking hour, I think. But we've never dealt with anything like this. And, you know, the Codes Department, we're not set up to manage construction sites. We're just not. I mean, we're building inspectors. So we're learning as we go. We're doing the best we can, and we're always open to suggestions, always trying to do things better. and staying flexible.
All right. So tell me, let's focus in on, because I mean, all I could do was look, but obviously you've gotten a firsthand approach. So for people who are listening today who will watch this, talk about between 170 and 178 Second Avenue North. Was it, obviously both sides got impacted. Are you talking about just the even numbered side on one side that took the brunt of the damage?
Yes, and so the AT&T building is on the other side of the street.
Right.
Or if you're looking up Second towards the courthouse, the AT&T building is on the left-hand side. And it's all one kind of big building, and it's all kind of just a very well constructed big building. And so while it did suffer damage, all what I'm really interested in, quite frankly, is the buildings on the right-hand side of the street, going up Second Avenue towards the courthouse. Those buildings, those older buildings, those old historical buildings that took the brunt of the blast. Those buildings that are directly across the street from the AT&T buildings, those buildings with the front facade that's been blown off, quite frankly. And so my interest really, I mean, aside from trying to get the businesses open and expediting all this, but in terms of rehabilitation, of what we can do towards rehabilitation, there's where my focus has been. And those are addresses are really between 170 and about 178. And again, it's the opinion of all of our experts that these buildings can be fully rehabilitated.
Well, so there was, when I walked down as far as I could get, there was still glass that was kind of, they had swept a lot of it out. The glass was kind of embedded in different holes and things like that, and it probably will be for a while. In particular, and we're talking about the buildings like, I think the old spaghetti factory may have been one of them. There was a steakhouse, the Melting Pot, Hooters is on that corner. We're talking about kind of those buildings on that side. The damage, again, looking at it, you could see a lot of the front facing had just been blown out. All the glasses were gone. But based upon what you can see, what you've seen, is it looks like those buildings are, because of the way they were built, they're structurally sound. You may have to, I know that Public Works, whoever was cleaning up, kept all the bricks so that, we can use them in terms of rebuilding back. Is that basically based upon what you all were looking at it from the standpoint of soundness, structural soundness? The buildings themselves will have to be rebuilt pursuant to the owners. And I know there's different historical things that will come into play. But again, from what you could see, what are they going to have to do to get that stuff repaired? How much, where was the front facing or the windows, or in terms of the floor levels, sound, and they're just going to have to build back the front facing? What are they looking at in terms of building back?
Yeah. So Jim, as you know, I'm a lowly land use lawyer, and I'm not a structural engineer. So I have to rely upon my experts, and so my experts tell me that the way these buildings were constructed is really kind of unique in that the walls that go up on either side had notches in them that supported the floor joists for the various floors. These buildings actually, I'm told, because of when they were constructed, were designed to burn down. And so what would happen is they were designed such that, because they were warehouses back in the 1860s, and fire happened. And so the fire would start, it would burn out the wooden floor joists. They were designed to fall. And when they fall, they would all pile up into the center of the building. When everything quit burning, they would go in and rake them all out. The way the buildings were designed is they would come back in, set new floor joists right where the other ones were, put the floors back in, and they're up and going in no time. Because of the way that these things were constructed back then, when the blast hit, it took out the front facade of these buildings that were right across from the bomb site. But the side walls of the buildings, for the most part, are largely unaffected by the blast. The blast kind of went through the back sides of these buildings for the most part, save one. are largely unaffected. Yeah, it blew the glass out the back. In some of the buildings you could see, because of when there's an explosion, I'm told, there's a vacuum that's created. Once all the air explodes out, it creates then a vacuum. So there's a secondary kind of explosion, if you will, but it's a reverse and it's coming back in. It's where the air is rushing back in to fill the vacuum. And so on the backside of these buildings on First Avenue, you'll see all the glass was blown in. And that's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the explanation there. The long and short of it is the backsides of these buildings along First Avenue largely are unaffected and are completely stable as the sides. So that leaves us with the front facades. The brick that's there, I know that Metro Historic has got an individual that they've identified who's going to be responsible for cataloging that brick, and we're going to do what we can to store it off site so that the same materials can be used during the reconstruction process. That's the goal.
So very interesting. Well, so one last question, and you sort of already answered it on Second Avenue, but and I so appreciate what you all have done and the expediency of trying to get people back in and having people go look quickly when they're called. But for those people who have not been down there, and you went down there, you obviously went down the day after. What was the biggest thing that you saw? I mean, just in terms of again, I mean, I've been down there and looked. It's just this. How did this happen? But from your standpoint and viewing it, what was the biggest thing on your mind as you went down that street? I guess the day after Christmas. When
my first trip down there, I was struck at the devastation, quite frankly. In watching the news reports on Christmas Day, I did not anticipate the level of damage that I ended up seeing. That was the biggest thing. I was just completely. I was almost in a state of shock, honestly. I mean, who would do this to Nashville? I mean, you don't expect that here. It was almost, for me, the first trip down there was almost just trying to take it all in. I was really in a state of shock on the whole thing, really. And it really took subsequent trips for me to really begin to focus on what we needed to do going forward.
Yeah. One of the things that, again, I wasn't down there and I haven't been all the way down the street. It was the level of devastation and the fact that we didn't have more people hurt or killed. It was, we were, for something that significant, it was pretty amazing that we didn't have more people hurt or injured.
No doubt, no doubt. And I'd like to send a shout out, if I could, to OEM, Office of Emergency Management, and their USAR teams, that's Urban Search and Rescue, as well as the police department. Those men and women did just an amazing job. And really what I'm talking about from my perspective is literally up until today, since the date of the blast up until today, the control of the site, what they've done to assist people towards getting to their buildings. Those men and women have been down there all day, every day since Christmas Day. And it's been really, really, really hard on them. And for us that are at our homes on the weekends, we don't see what the extremely long and difficult hours that those people have had down there. And so I wanted to thank them for that.
Thanks for pointing that out. That's important. And thanks for all the information you just gave on that. I think that's very, very helpful to everybody. Well, we've got a little less than 20 minutes left. I'm going to go through some of the questions that people have sent in. Some of them have been answered. So one of the first questions we got was, how is your team managing with 3 different mayors in 4 years? Has it been choppy, or has it been just kind of, you just go with the flow because you know what your responsibilities are and you just do it?
It's the latter. We just go with the flow. You know, we're really lucky in that all the administrations have been very good to us. I've got some of the best people in the world working here. They're so very dedicated. Um, so we do our level best to go about our business every single day to do the best job that we possibly can. I will say this is that we have utilized technology to a huge extent to help us be more efficient. And I'm gonna also say one thing that has helped us a lot, quite frankly, is we engaged in a rental car program where now all of my building inspectors have a car. Previous to this program, which has been in place for about 8 months now, um, not all my building inspectors had a car. And a building inspector without a car is not a building inspector at all. So that program, and you know, if a car breaks down or whatever it may be, the rental company comes, picks it up, and drops us off a new one. We're never without vehicles. What that's done for Nashville, quite frankly, it has reduced our inspection times to literally same day or next day service, which means that sites move quicker, inspections happen faster, and it's not just the building inspector, it's also the property standards inspectors. And we're able to do more in less time because we don't waste an hour and a half every single day hunting a car for all of our inspectors. That's been huge for us. It's been monumental for us. So, with Keith Durbin and Amy Neal and the IT department, making things easier for us via our computer systems, it's made us way, way, way more efficient. For instance, all building permits can be submitted, applications can be submitted online. They can be paid for online. There's no reason for anybody to have to come and sit down here at the codes department anymore. And we had this all in place before COVID. So when COVID hit, it was an easy transition for us because we were really already doing it. So these are just the types of things that we've been looking at our processes over really the last 2 or 3 years to see how can we streamline this? How can we make it better for everybody and for us? It's all in all, I'm not going to say it's without its problems, of course. Whenever you change processes, it has problems. But all in all, you know, I think most people would say it's worked pretty dang well.
Well, tell me, so we had a question about technology, which I'm glad you mentioned it. They follow the technology question with a short-term rental question. Right. Inspection, who's doing what, and how do we keep up with it? I knew we had some technology that we received to help us with that. Give us an update on that.
Okay, gladly, because this is something, I'm so glad you asked this question. We utilize a third-party vendor to help us catch illegally operating short-term rentals. And since, well, I'll just tell you right now, in Davidson County, we're at something around a 96% compliance rate. I would say that is hands down the highest in the United States for a city our size. Nobody's even close to that. Most cities without this type of technology operate at about a 15% compliance rate. Again, my last check, we were at something crowding 96% compliance. That's huge for us. And so what it really allows us to do is, I've got a team of about 4 or 5 people that do nothing but catch illegally operating short-term rentals. And we utilize this technology, quite frankly, the technology will surf all known platforms where somebody might advertise a short-term rental. And that may be Facebook. It's not just Airbnb and VRBO. It's the smaller platforms. and they surf these platforms constantly to find people that are advertising short-term rentals. They then cross-reference, because they have our database, they cross-reference to see if the people that are advertising on these platforms have permits. And if they find one that doesn't have a permit, then the vendor sends a notification to them that says, you've been caught, stop now. And if they don't stop now, then we file the warrant in court. The vendor captures all of the illegal advertisements where they're advertising illegally. We use that as evidence in court to prosecute the illegally operating short-term rentals. To date, we've put several people in jail, and we've gotten a number of fines in excess of $10,000. So we're very vigorous in prosecuting these folks, and it's paid off. I mean, at 96% compliance, I mean, I am so proud of our team for that.
That's amazing. Because I remember discussions in the council where everybody was just mad about all this. So congratulations to you and your staff. That's amazing. We had gotten a question during the discussion about your ideal staffing levels. So remember, you got council members on the call that pass your budget. You know, and obviously resources are always an issue, but what is, based upon how many people do you have, and what is your ideal staffing levels?
That's a great question. We have about 118 employees under the codes department. We have about a little more than 60 are actual inspectors. Now they may be building, plumbing, and property standards inspectors. With the growth of Nashville, we need one or two more of the building inspectors in each category. One or two more building inspectors, one or two more plumbing, one or two more electrical, one or two more gas mechanical. The more inspectors we have, the quicker our turnarounds and the more careful our inspectors can be. So if a building inspector leaves in the morning and has 20 inspections to perform, and he has to get those inspections done and be back here in the office to do his paperwork, that's a challenge for him to hit 20 construction sites within a day and do the inspection. And to do those inspections, they're going to have to be cursory, quite frankly, for him to get them done. So to do a better job and be more careful, it would be nice if we had more building inspectors. And I'm sure that all the council persons out there who hear the complaints regarding property standards and junk, trash, and debris would like it if we had better turnaround times for our property standards inspectors, and we had the ability, quite frankly, to keep better records. And that all comes with, if we had some more property standards inspectors, we could pay more attention to properties, we could do a better and more complete job. So I wish I could just answer the question and say, I need 20 more people. But if we get really granular on it, I need more inspectors. And if I had a few more people in the office to do the administrative work, we'd be better off. Okay,
thank you. Thanks for answering that. Okay, next question that somebody asked was they were talking about variances of codes. I know most people are familiar with the variance to a zone or things like that. When you talk about, when somebody says, what's a variance to a code, what are they talking about?
Yeah, so that's under zoning law, and this goes pursuant to state law. The Metro Council adopts a zoning code, and the zoning code sets all of these criteria for the way that somebody can use their land. And that may be the use itself. It may be the number of parking spaces. It may be the size of their yard or the setback or whatever. So the zoning code sets all of these criteria out. And this is pursuant to state law, any individual property owner is not able to comply with the criteria. And a typical one is going to be a setback. In other words, a new house must be set back a certain distance from property lines based upon the location. And so if for any reason you feel like you can't comply with that law, then you have the ability to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask them for a variance. And that is to vary the strict application of the zoning code. Now, the Board of Zoning Appeals doesn't have just unfettered ability to grant variances. The variance must be based upon some physical characteristic of the property. So if you wanted to build your house within a setback, you would need to explain to the Board of Zoning Appeals that perhaps you had a very steep lot or a very narrow lot. You get the picture, something related to the property itself. It can't be, I just don't want to build it here or whatever. It has to be related to a physical feature of the property. It then has to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the Board of Zoning Appeals has to state on the record the basis that they're granting the variance, because a variance is just that. It is varying the strict application of the law.
Okay. All right. Let me go back to something, because your comments are generating questions and I'm reading them as they come in, but it's a good one. So I get the variances, but you were talking before about your staffing folks going out and inspecting certain things. And the question came in about, why do they have to come back and do the paperwork in the office? Do they have access to computers out on the site where, you know, once they're doing it, they can actually just type in their information. They don't have to worry so much about getting in. That was the question.
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to refine what I said a little bit earlier. Because of COVID. We've changed our processes a bit. So our inspectors really don't come into the office. What they do is bring they come in their personal vehicle. They come into our parking garage. They then get into their codes vehicle that's in our parking garage. They have their laptops and they can, open their laptops there, and their laptops will then sync up with our computer system from the parking garage.
Yeah.
And so they then receive the addresses where they're going to go inspect. They do their inspections. They come back, and then they can enter the results of their inspection. For their laptop to then sync up, it needs to be in our parking garage. So they don't actually come into the building to do our paperwork. Some do, but most of them just actually sit in their car in the parking garage, enter the results of their inspections, hop in their personal vehicle, and go home at the end of the day.
Got it. Okay. That answered that question. Somebody had asked about new projects and the lag time in terms of if somebody is starting a new project, is there a lag time in getting these things off the ground? I mean, it sounds like things are moving fairly quickly, but obviously we have now, you know, folks having to deal with the blast on 2nd Avenue. It was kind of a generic question. From somebody who comes in and starts working on a project and then starts dealing with you all, is there a delay, or, you know, how fast can you move on something like that?
This is a great question, and I really appreciate it. So the codes department is responsible for making that building permit application. When the application is then made, we track various other departments like the fire marshal and public works and stormwater, water and sewer, health department. So to answer the question, and planning, to answer the question is, I really can't answer the question, because so many other departments have a stake in the approval process for the issuance of the building permit, that it may be that for whatever reason, the developer can't seem to get their grading plan approved by stormwater. And so until they get that done and stormwater approves, then the building permit can't be issued. Or maybe it's the fact that the drawings that have been submitted to codes by the private architect have inconsistencies or don't comply with the International Building Code. So our reviewers will mark up the sets of plans, send it back to the architect, ask him or her to fix it. And, and maybe they sit on it for 2 or 3 months because they're busy or whatever it may be. And then it comes back to, so there is delay. For the codes department, what we do is we do everything possible to make sure that the codes department is not responsible for that delay. We don't have any control over the stormwater grading permit review processes or whether water services signs off on the permit application. We just have control over our little piece of the pie, and we try to do the best we can.
Got it. Got it. All right. So, and this may be, I know we're getting towards the end. This may be the last question for you. And it's an interesting one. They were talking about a specific thing on White Ridge Road. It was one of the questions that came in. They're concerned about what may happen actually with the Steinmart that was in Lion's Head, that area. And they're concerned about what may happen if, and I know part of the answer to this question, if somebody hears a rumor or hears that something may be pending on a particular location, what's the best way for them to find out what's happening? I mean, you all deal with codes and permits and architectural designs. You got water that has to deal with certain things. You've also got a council member that is supposed to know kind of what's going on. What would you tell somebody who's going like, what's the best way to find out actually what is actually happening in a location?
Here's what I did on that project this morning because I didn't know anything about it. So codes department, we issue, I don't know, what do we issue? 10, 12,000 building permits a year. You know, I don't see those permits. So my suggestion is exactly what I did this morning for that particular question. And that is, I went to Parcel Viewer. And so if you go to the planning department's website, they have a remarkable mapping and GIS division. And there's a link to a mapping, an interactive mapping platform called Parcel Viewer. And that's exactly what I did. So I went to the map and I just happened to know where the Steinmart building is over in White Ridge Road. So I clicked on it to see what's going on with that. And in Parcel Viewer, any permits that are there, you can see. And it will tell you the zoning of the property. It'll tell you, I used Parcel Viewer all day, every day. So that's what I did. So what did I do in this case? I went and looked. I went to the Steinmart building. I opened it up on that particular parcel, and I saw that it's in a commercial PUD overlay, which then tells me that the planning department is going to be responsible for the review of this entire project, because anything that's under an overlay, a planning overlay, they're in charge of what the building looks like, the number of units, the parking, all that stuff. It's not in the codes department's purview at that point. I also saw in Parcel Viewer that there's an application to rezone the property. And so and it was just submitted last week, and the application is to rezone it to an SP specific plan, which means that this whole project will then have to go before the Metro Council. There'll be a public hearing there for people to voice their concerns, get their questions answered. It will also have to go in front of the Planning Commission for a public hearing. So all this being said is, what I was able to glean from Parcel Viewer this morning is that this application to rezone the property to a specific plan was just filed like last week. So it's very preliminary. So there's going to be a lot of ongoing discussions with both the council person and the Metro Council and the planning department towards the develop of how this project actually develops.
Very, very helpful. I would say that, yeah, I think I've been on that site before, but not in a while. So it's a good way to start. If people look at it and get confused about the terminology, they can certainly call the district council member and say, okay, what is this? And if the council member doesn't fully, if they're not fully vetted on the issue, they can find out and get back to the individual. So it's a great way to find that out.
Yeah.
Bill, we are out of time. You have been extremely helpful. I so much appreciate what you've talked about today, overall, what you're doing on 2nd Avenue. And just what you do overall for the coach department. You have a big fan club. People are sending in nice things throughout the week. And then I've got Alma Sanford and Avi Poster who wanted me to tell you hello because they like you.
They're the best. Thank you all so much.
They are. So anyway, you're doing great. Thank you for your time today. Everybody, we will be back next week. We're working on special guests for next week. We'll see. But we'll be back next Saturday. Bill, thanks for the time today again. Everybody be safe. Enjoy the day. And we'll see you all next week. All right. Thanks again.